Welcome to DubLife Diaries, the podcast where passion meets the open road. I'm Joe Person, your host and also a lifelong dubber. Buckle up because this ride is just beginning. This podcast is sponsored by Volksmania magazine. Good times, great cars, awesome Volksmaniacs. Visit Volksmania.com to learn more about this class-leading VW magazine. All right, welcome back to DubLife Diaries, the VW lifestyle podcast. Today's guest isn't just a builder. He is a revivalist, a man whose blood truly runs air-cooled. Born and raised in the red clay of Odenville, Alabama, where mudslinging Sundays were sacred and Volkswagens weren't just cars, they were more like family. He grew up wrenching with his father, the legendary Frank White, in a backyard shop where magic happened, just one greasy bolt at a time. From humble beginnings, scrubbing parts, to full-blown Baja builds, Chris White has lived and breathed the dub life longer than some of us have been alive. He stepped away as life sometimes demands, but fate, a 73 thing, and a pandemic gave him a second chance. And that's when Riverbank Customs was born. Since then, he and his crew have built show-stopping Volkswagens, dominated the Southeast scene, and reignited a movement that blends old-school soul with new-school craftsmanship. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a faith-driven craftsman, and today we dive into the mud, the metal, and the memories of a true Southern VW legend. Please welcome to the podcast the founder of Riverbank Customs, the king of clean build, and the heart of Alabama's air-cooled revival. Give it up for Christopher White.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having us on, man. This is a huge honor for me and my crew.
Man, thank you for being willing. I'll tell a story about you here in just a second. But about 3 years ago, I came to Bug Jam and I met you and I talked to you at your booth and we just rapped for a couple minutes and you don't remember me and it's okay. But back what came home was your logo and your sticker and it went on my nightstand. It's like I don't know, it's like next to my bed, but it's just, I just stuff a bunch of stuff in it. But you open the right side door and it's all my VW stuff and stickers, from collectively from over the years. And you're up at the top left. So I don't know if I dreamed this into reality or what, but it ended up happening, man. So I've known you since before I knew you.
Hey, that's cool. And one thing that we kind of live by here, and one thing that God has shown, in all this, God puts people in places. He has a plan for all of us, and he puts people in that plan where he wants them to be, and he makes things happen. So who knows? He may have put us together.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I feel like that's all that it can be because there's really nothing else that could line us up like that. So before we dive into some awesome questions, I can't wait to get going on this episode today. This is going to be so exciting. I do want to touch base on a couple of my sponsors. Volksmania magazine. I feel it's the flyest VW magazine on the face of the planet. USA subscribers only. Use DubLife10 for 10% off your subscription. This episode is also powered by Salty Dub, born by the beach, built for the road, where VW vibes meet epic events and swag. Obviously, you can get all the latest at saltydub.com. Also, use DubLife, DUBLIFE, at checkout for 10% off your purchase. My last shout out to my buddy, Dino Styles, Dino's Garage in DC Metro. If you're in that area, everybody needs a good Volkswagen mechanic. So that is your guy. Dino, thank you for the support. All right, my man. Mr. Chris White, back to you. Thank
you.
So tell me, man, what was life like growing up in Odenville?
Man, that's a huge question right there. And that's something that is a huge topic in my life around me and my family and my friends. Growing up in Odenville was like small town USA. A lot like Mayberry, for those of you that are old enough to remember the Andy Griffith Show. Odenville was truly that place where everybody knew everybody. Most families, including the Layton family that we'll talk about later on, are 3 and even 4 generations deep in this community.
Wow.
My brother and I attended the same high school that our father did. You could literally stand on our front porch and see the high school. We live within a mile of where Daddy actually grew up and spent most of his life. It's that town where everybody knew everybody, like I said, But I can remember as a teenager, and sometimes I was a pretty wild child. When I got in trouble, with the police, they took me home. And that was the worst thing they could do. They took me home to daddy because daddy was one of their friends. I never got a ticket in Odenville. I always got carried home. And that kind of always created the feeling that, that Odenville was my safe place. If I got in trouble, if I could get back to Odenville, everything would be okay. If I got to running with the wrong crowd, if I could get back to Odenville, everything would be okay. I actually, one time, I was older and I knew better. I got in trouble once for driving my rail buggy down the wrong side of the road. I was going to a little test hill right there beside the shop, and I just stayed in the left-hand lane. So when Chief Bill pulled me over, he kind of fussed at me a little bit, and he said, "Chris, all I need you to do, I don't care if you're driving this thing on the road." He said, "But I just need you to stay in the right lane. Could you do that?" So that's kind of how we grew up.
So you mentioned your dad a couple times in that. Obviously sounds like a legend. What was Frank White like in the shop?
Well, again, thanks for asking about my daddy. After daddy passed away in 2013, Mama used to always say, "Your favorite hobby or your favorite thing is talk about your daddy." And it actually was. Growing up in Odenville, as I talked about, we were 3 generations deep. Daddy was well known in Odenville because he was from there. We also lived on that main drag in town. You had to going into town, you went right past our house, right past our shop. At one time, my daddy and his best friend, Terry Searles, were the police in the city. And now imagine that. Daddy's shop was right beside our house. So if you coming down that highway 411 right there going into Odenville, you saw what was sitting at the shop or you saw what we was working on. And it was just cool because everybody saw the Volkswagen sitting out there. Working in the shop with Daddy, he was totally focused, especially if he was building an engine or something. He didn't want a lot of humor and he didn't want a lot of horseplay while he was trying to work on something, especially at the engine, the bottom end of the engine. He didn't want to miss something. Again, he was totally focused. He was that guy that he didn't laugh and cut up a lot. At least he didn't with me. He may have when he was off with his his other friends, but he was always business when he was in the shop there with me. And he was that guy. He was that old school. I don't want to call my own daddy a greaser, but for a sense, that's what he was. He grew up dirt road poor. And he learned to fix everything. He learned to fix his stuff because he wasn't going to pay somebody else.
That's right.
He was that guy who always had the grease rag hanging out his back pocket. Growing up, if daddy moved, I moved. He was truly my best friend. I was there with him as much as I possibly could to hand him tools, to lose his tools, which he got on me pretty hard, over the course of my life. Or if it wasn't nothing else, but just I'd be playing in the car or the buggy while he was working on it, and he'd get mad because I was knocking dirt down into his eyes while he was under the car. Dude, little did I know those nights out there in the shop and those weekends, little did I know that would shape my future. Learning what I learned from him, the basics of mechanics, that's what got me into the automotive industry. And my mechanical experience is what led me to where I'm at today. Not just in the Volkswagen scene, the Volkswagen community, but also in my career at Honda.
Let's go back to being a kid. How'd it feel for you to be a young boy and grow up around all that?
It never bothered me a bit. I mean, my mama used to get so aggravated. My clothes would be nasty and greasy and ratty. That was my happy place. Again, and you'll hear me talk about this throughout the podcast. Whatever daddy was doing, wherever daddy was at, that's what I want to be doing. And if there was an engine sitting out there, or whether it was a go-kart engine for me, or whether it was a Volkswagen engine or a lawnmower, whatever, I was that kid that was going to tear it apart. I was going to tear it apart, figure out what made it work, and put it back together. That's how I learned. And I didn't care. That's where I was happiest at. If I was knee deep in the grease, grime, it didn't matter to me. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to tear that greasy, nasty engine down.
Let's reflect on and even fast forward now, to where you ended up because of all the lessons that you learned to being a young child, being around your father. What was one of the first times, if you can remember, that your dad ever saw one of your builds?
Okay, so one of the first things that I built on my own that really comes to mind, I built a lot of buggies, but he and I built them together. So that that was something we did together. And I remember asking him one time, I said, Dad, do you ever think I'd take them buggies to the next level? Because we were in the backyard and there was a kind of a wind berm or a water berm there in his backyard, and I was jumping it in my rail. And he'd tell me, he'd say, go around a little bit, go a little bit different, hit it a little bit different, or go a little bit faster. And he was kind of getting excited about it too. I just remember asking him, did you think I'd ever take it to this level? Because I had so much more equipment, so much better equipment than he had ever had. And he just said he said, yeah, I really did. But one of the funniest builds that really comes to mind, Daddy was also into motorcycles in a younger age, street bikes, Harley Davidsons, that sort of thing. And he actually got hurt really bad when he was, a young adult. So therefore, a period of time when I got away from the Volkswagen scene, I got into the chopper product. If you remember when Orange County choppers and Jesse James and all that was real popular.
Oh yeah.
I got into the motorcycle thing. Well, I built, as ironic as it is, I built a CB750 Honda chopper. Rigid frame, extended forks. I mean, outlaw. This thing was bad, but it was a death machine. I mean, it was an accident waiting to happen. And I'll never forget, Daddy got on it one time because there again, he liked motorcycles. He got on it one time and go ride it around the yard, and he didn't go, I don't know, 50, 75 feet. And he come back, he got off of it, and he said, there ain't no way I'm riding that thing. He said, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you ride that thing with no suspension. But that was one of my first builds, and I remember seeing his expression. I remember seeing his smiling face because he thought it was cool, but he wasn't riding it.
Tell me about that time that you were freezing in the 74 Beetle on the way to school. I know this created a impactful memory for you.
So talking about the 74 Beetle, just a little bit of history about that to start with. And please excuse me, I can get very long-winded. I'm that person who loves to reminisce.
Oh, let's get it. I love these stories.
But when my brother, my older brother, my brother Keith, he's 5 years older than I am. When Keith come along, Daddy built him a 74 model standard Beetle. I never forget. We bought it from my uncle's car lot. It was that godly orange or ungodly orange. It had the vents in the back and it had the rust around the vents. It's very common.
Yeah.
Just an average Beetle. Run good. This is a 74 model and it was probably in 86. So it was still fairly a new car. We took that car completely apart, sanded it down, bare metal, and repainted it. Painted it, I don't know the exact color, painted it a metallic silver. Had the aluminum Kragers on it, and it was a beautiful car. We de-chromed it. We painted all the chrome a flat black, the huge shock bumpers, we painted them black. All the trim on the side was black. And everything really matched. And in typical 80s theme, I told you it had the Kragers on the back, but it had had Kragers all the way around. It had the big tires on the back, small tires on the front.
Yep.
That diamond tuck interior, that just screams 1980s. But we drove that car. Keith and I drove that car back and forth to school every day. And like I said, you could stand on our front porch and see the high school. But every morning during the winter, Keith would go out there, and God love him, he'd crank it up. He'd done call himself, let it warm up. And 10 minutes later, we'd go out there and get in, and it'd still be cold. And here we'd go down the driveway, and he'd go dead. Every time he'd lay down on the clutch, he'd go dead. It wouldn't idle to save for nothing. I couldn't figure out, why can Daddy work on all these customers' cars and make them perfect? But the one car that his kids are riding in, he can't make run. He can't make it idle. So every day, we about froze to death. And I was so embarrassed because I was afraid that car was going to break down and leave us stranded right there. And somebody was going to see us. I get embarrassed. When my cars break down, I get embarrassed real easy. That's just me. So I was so scared, but Keith was good at it. I had to give him credit, and I give him credit to this day. He could literally have his one foot on the clutch, one foot on the brake, have his foot turned sideways and trying to give it a little gas to keep it running. And when it died, he had his one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the switch, and was cranking it back up almost before it died. And for 2 years, we made it back and forth to school till he graduated and moved on and traded it in and got something else. Those trips in that Volkswagen, freezing to death and trying to keep it running, I knew right then my first car was not going to be a Volkswagen.
Man, great memory. Talk to me about the first Baja that you built from scrap. So you build it from junk.
So you heard me talking about, I promised myself my first car was not going to be a Volkswagen.
That's right.
So a few years rocked on. Keith was still living at home, but the lowrider scene had come along. The lowrider scene had made its way to Central Alabama. Everything cool starts on the East Coast and makes its way here. But the lowrider scene had finally made it here. So when I was 16, Daddy built me a 84-mile Chevrolet S10. Slammed, hydraulic bed, custom paint job, custom interior. It was cool. So I turned 16. Wasn't really a whole lot of truck shows going on at the time. It was kind of fading out a little bit. And I just kept being pulled back to the Volkswagens. I finally had a job where I was making a little bit of money because I was able to drive. I was making a little bit of money and I could drive, if I needed something, I could go get it. So there was an older Baja sitting in the backyard, kind of shoved up in the woods. We had 3 acres where we lived at, and we kind of stored a lot of stuff in the back, kind of behind the shop. And this was a Baja that had belonged to a friend of Daddy's, and it was a swing axle. They tore the spider gears out of it. And when that happened, they just kind of shoved it up in the woods and forgot about it. So I go up there and I pull it out. I knew I could fix it because I knew what it'd take. It wasn't no transmission, no motor. I bought a transmission from a friend of mine. I want to say for $100, $150. And Daddy had an engine sitting there in the shop floor. I don't know where it come from. I don't know nothing about it. I just know it was a dual port and it was complete. So I put that transmission in there, stuck that engine in there, and in all Daddy's collection, he had a set of old tractor tires, old tractor V's. So I stuck all that together, bolted it all together. Don't even know where all this stuff come from. Don't know where I got a battery from. Maybe it's something Daddy had. And was able to get this thing cranked and running. Well, that's about all it would do is crank and run. It would drive, but it was terrible. I never one time thought about brakes till I went driving around the yard and it had none. But it was fun, and that started it all. And honestly, I don't remember. I just remember it being a solid car, and it had been cut. Somebody had cut the fenders off of it, cut the front and rear aprons off of it. And I want to say, please don't crucify me, I want to say it was a 67. You just don't cut up a 67.
Fast forward a bit, meeting Joel Howard and Lee Bailey, Big D. How did those guys change your perspective?
So Lee and Joel were best friends. So I'm going to try to tell this story, and we'll probably go round and round and go back and forth because this is a long part of the story. Lee and Joel were best friends. Lee was a mechanic at the bug shop, and the term Big D comes from just kind of being the leader of the bunch. He was kind of the big dog. He was the one we were always trying to knock off the podium. He had all the best equipment. He probably had the best skills. And other than luck, sometimes he was probably the best driver. So I met Lee from just going down to the bug shop. The bug shop was a local Volkswagen restoration parts store type deal, just a few minutes from our shop. So I met him from there. But I was coming home early one Sunday morning from a night of out partying and probably drinking all night. And as I was coming down the road, little country road there, I seen this Baja sitting at the gas station. And man, it was wild. So I turned around and go back. And the gentleman, he's standing there pumping gas in it. And he introduces himself as Joel Howard. So he began to tell me about the car and all this. And at this time, I had no idea that Lee had built it. But it was just a super cool car. And it wasn't very long after that I put Lee and Joel together. Joel loved riding the woods. Lee loved riding the woods. But it was all about hill climbing to them. Back then, that's what we did. We went from hill to hill and see who could make it to the top. You could make it to the top. You could be the king of the hill that day, and they might remember you to the next weekend. But if you turned over and tore a bunch of stuff up, they'd remember, and people remember you forever.
It was that effort, the amount of effort you would give to, ragdoll it and make it unforgettable.
Yes, that's exactly how it was.
What were some of the biggest lessons that you kind of stuck out in, across your career from, these guys, the OGs of local bug shop?
So talking about the local bug shop, that also, that's a lot of what Joel's car was. Joel's car that I seen at the gas station that morning was actually built by Lee Bailey at the bug shop. So to tell you a little bit about that car, it was the wildest creation I'd ever seen. It looked like something that would literally race in the Baja 1000, you know, every season.
Big,
It was
huge
that
travel
cool.
on the suspension, and
It had suspension that I never had no idea of. It had a widened suspension. It had extended trailer arms, 3x6 trailer arms. It had disc brakes on all four corners. It had, at that time, it had just had tractor beads on, which is common for what we were running back then. But it had these enormous shocks and shock towers that went up in the car. Not only did the shocks go up into the back of the car and tie it into like a roll cage, but it even had the gas tank in the back of the car where the back seat would normally be. And to me, that was just that was just wild. I could see this thing climbing some monster hills. Man, that lit a fire under me and excitement that just it just set me on fire. I had to have one. I had to figure out how to build one. I had to have one. And that's a lot of what I learned from hanging around the bug shop, hanging around with Lee. We ride on Saturday and Sunday. Sometimes we'd ride Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Monday afternoon, we all met back at the bug shop and what we used to call bench top racing. We was all hanging out at the bug shop there and kind of talking about things. What was this? What was that? And laughing at one another for being silly and hanging out at the bug shop. I learned kind of more the technical side. Daddy was good. Daddy was really good at building engines, and he was really good at making them run and doing the mechanics of it. But the biggest thing that Daddy ever built was like an 1835, and it was a strong engine. So when I was hanging around the bug shop, these guys were taking it to the next level. They had big stroker engines and just crazy combinations and running some big tires and just things that you wouldn't think a Volkswagen could do. They were making them do it, and I just fell in love with that, and that's what I wanted to do. So I learned a lot about how to build a stroker engine, how to clearance the case, what that was all about. Uh, I really think being down there at the bug shop as a little know-it-all kid, because that's what I was. I was 17, 18 years old hanging out with these older guys, and I really think Lee just liked to laugh at me. I think he liked to laugh at me and see what he could trade me or sell me or just whatever we could do. And then fast forward 33 years later, we're great friends. If Lee Bailey had it on his car, on his Baja, or if he had it on his rail, in my mind, it must be the gospel. It must be the best equipment you can buy.
That's awesome, man.
I never forget one time. This is how much influence he had on me back then. The bug shop had sponsored a big poker run there at Odenville, and there was probably 100 cars, 100 buggies, Bajas, motorcycles, whatever showed up. And again, it was all about who could get to the top of the hill. It was a competition. So Lee had told me he'd done a lot of work to his Baja to make it lightweight. And we laughed, and I was like, lightweight? Because these cars don't weigh nothing anyway. And he said, man, you ain't going to believe this. I said, what? He said, I even threw my ashtray out. He said, I even took my ashtray out. I couldn't stand that. I reached up and grabbed my ashtray and threw it out the window. It was $20 worth of change in the ashtray.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But that's how crazy it was. But on a serious note, Bug Shop was owned by Mr. Bill Winsey, and he was one of the greatest guys that I was ever around. He owned the shop. He was always willing to help everybody. And if I needed something and I really didn't have the money right then, he knew I was good for it. He said, take it with you, you can pay me later. Those days, those kind of people, those days, those shops, they're just few and far between now.
Yeah, yeah. I understand and recognize that level of commitment and almost that level of service. For your best customers at times, especially young kids, sometimes, like you said, man, they're good for it. And yeah, I just, what a vibe for sure. Life continued to happen around you. You grew up, and I know you went through a stint where you got away from VWs. So at the time that you were away from them, talk to me about what that time frame was, and did you ever think that you would get back into them?
So looking back, we were riding buggies, like I said, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was just, and that's what we did. We'd ride them all weekend, work on them all week. And it was just a lifestyle. And it became consuming. So after my wife Becky and I bought our first house, soon after that, my son was born, my first child. I felt like it was time to step up. I felt like God was telling me, "Hey, it's time for you to grow up. It's time for you." Which I've always been the one to work, and never had a problem with that. At this time, I was working at a aviation place next to the Birmingham airport, and things was really good. But I felt like I had a bigger responsibility now than being out there in the woods, bouncing around, rolling up down the hills. I just felt like there was more. I needed to be more responsible. It was time to. It was time to have something. It was time to start our life together. So at this time, like I said, I was working at the airport, and I was also running a lawn care business, kind of like Derrick Henry, but not to that size. So, but I wanted it to be something. I wanted to see what could I make out of it, what could I do with it. So I knew the only way I was ever going to be successful, either in my career or running my business, whatever it was, I needed to be focused. I needed to be focused on the good things. I'm focused on having something besides focused on where am I going this weekend. So I made the decision. I never forget. I was standing out in my daddy's backyard. My buggy was sitting there on a trailer and it was muddy and it was just trashed from the weekend. And I was already kind of making a checklist of what I needed to fix and what I needed to do. And honestly, I was probably getting the beer cans out of it. And I thought that, I need to put this thing up. So I hooked my truck up to it and I backed it trailer and all right inside the barn up at my daddy's. And that's where it sat that whole summer. So later on, it sat there all the summer. We still went on a few more rides. Everywhere we rode at had kind of got shut down and it was just getting tougher and tougher. So it just kind of moved on to other things. Like I said, our riding place got shut down. Most of everybody had sold their equipment. And there wasn't, at that point in time, there wasn't any cars around. It wasn't like I could just go find a full body, all original car and restore it. There wasn't any. Any Volkswagens that were around our community, around my area, probably in the state of Alabama. We had cut them up. People had cut them up and run them in the woods. There wasn't, the streetcar scene had never really took off here. So I kind of moved on to other things. That's kind of when I got into the chopper scene and building motorcycles, as we was talking about.
How many years did you step away?
Probably I went to work at Honda in 2004. So I probably had gotten away from the Volkswagen scene shortly before that. And also I knew, looking back, there's no way I could hold down a job on a manufacturing assembly line in the automotive industry and still do the things I did every weekend. So sometime around 2001, 2002, when I got out of the Volkswagen scene, and then I stayed out of it until somewhere just before COVID.
Wow. So you took a good amount of time off.
Yes, I started a career at Honda and I raised 2 kids.
Yeah. I mean, excellent. Fantastic. Both awesome. Was there a moment in that time that you ever felt, well, not necessarily that you were done with Volkswagen, but that you would never come back? Did it ever feel like you were never coming back, that you were, man, I'm done with this? It's like, just a hobby or what I did when I was young. Did you ever feel like you were never going back?
As a mechanic, as a entrepreneur, as a gearhead, I can remember thinking, I want to learn how to work on something besides an air-cooled Volkswagen. Everybody says anybody can build a small block Chevrolet. Well, that's something I've never done. It's all the same concept, but it's just something I've never done. My main focus, my main thing, my whole life has been Volkswagen and, air-cooled Volkswagens. So I wanted to do something else. I wanted to build some other kind of car. I was still into building things, but I wanted to build something else. So that's when I started doing the work on the old school Honda motorcycles. I worked on quite a few of them. And there again, there wasn't a whole lot of Volkswagens left around here because we had cut them up. I can remember, I didn't see this personally, but one of our local junkyards, Jim's VW here in Leeds, Alabama, real close to my house, I can remember Jim telling me that they brought a crusher out to his junkyard and crushed over 100 cars. So they were gone.
And I remember, though, I grew up in these times too, 70s, 80s. I was born in 77. I got my first Beetle that was a 72 in 96. I remember all of this. I remember car crushing. I remember when, they used to tell you to pour that engine C stuff in your block before the record come pick it up. Man, I remember, those years. Crazy, crazy times.
Yep.
They just crushed them and they were gone forever. And you don't even think that just 100 of them in just that one shop in your little old town.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy, man. Crazy for sure. So fast forward a little bit. I know you had touched on this in some of your background, but you got a phone call from a Miss Aura Mae Layton. And tell me how this phone call changed your life.
So a little history about this, and we have touched on this a little bit. Again, growing up in small town USA, growing up in Odenville, you knew everybody. Miss Layton was a school bus driver. Miss Aura Mae, she was a school bus driver and a substitute teacher there at the high school where I went to school at. But not only that, she was a neighbor from less than a mile down the road. I went to school with her kids, Dennis and Gwen. We all grew up from little kids together. But there was a time when we were all little kids that we all hunted together. Mr. and Mrs. Layton hunted, deer hunted in a club that I was in with some other friends of mine, some other, friends of my daddy's. My dad didn't hunt. We worked all the time. The friendship kind of began, and I had always really been close to this family, especially after my daddy died. Mr. and Mrs. Layton kind of really took me in, and they just, Mr. Larry and Miss Aura Mae, they're great people. They've been really, really good to me, and they've been good to my kids and my family. I had always heard Miss Aura Mae talk about she wanted a Volkswagen thing, and she'd always reference to one that Daddy had there at the shop. Daddy had one that belonged to a friend of ours that we kind of stored for years. She kept referencing that car. So she calls me one night, and she says, "Hey, Chris, I need you to look at something." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, She said, "I'm serious. I need you to go online and go to this eBay auction and look at this car." She said, "I want to buy it." She said, "It's a 73 Volkswagen thing." And I want to say, I could be wrong. I'd have to ask her. I want to say it was like in upstate New York. So number one, it's a northern car. We all know about that. And it's on eBay. So I was automatically against it because it was a substantial amount of money. And I could tell by the sound of her voice, she was determined on buying this car. So I went and looked at it, and I called her back and I said, "Miss Aura Mae," I said, "I'm going to be honest with you, I'm scared of it." I said, if I could was standing there looking at it, it may be altogether different. I said, but I'm not. And there's things that I can't see in the picture. I don't know. I'm just scared of it. It was a complete car. Had BRM wheels on it. It was black and white. And it was a nice car the way it was. So little did I know at the time, her and Mr. Larry was kind of fussing back and forth about his money and her money and my things and your things. As married couples do.
Yep.
And she told me later on, she said, "I was buying that car. I was mad at Larry and I was buying that car." Yeah, she'll call me, and after this podcast, she'll call me and she'll say, "You probably shouldn't have told that, but that's just part of the story."
Yeah.
So she called me later, maybe the next day, and she said, "Hey, I bought that car." I said, "Okay." She said, "I'm having it shipped to Dennis's house. It's Dennis's shop." I said, "Okay." She said, "Supposed to be here Friday." I think it actually got there during the day, and I wasn't there when they unloaded it, but I was there shortly after that. And luckily enough, it turned out to be a fairly nice car. It had never been restored. It was kind of unmolested. It needed some work, but it was running, driving. It was well worth what she paid for.
What was it like? I know you brought that car back to life, and that's one of the things that got you back on track. But what was it like bringing that thing back to life?
So the coolest thing about that car, we played with it all summer. We took it to some cruising ends, and we took it to some just local events. Nothing, at this time, it was not a show car at all. I think it even had some kind of Stinger exhaust on it. And it was, for lack of a better word, it was kind of ratty, but it was cool. I would have left it alone. But as fall rolled around and winter rolled around, she talked about doing a full restoration on that car. And she asked me, would I be she didn't say, would I be interested? She said, would I be willing to build the engine? And this family, they mean the world to me. There's no way there's nothing that could have made me say no. So, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "When you're ready, we'll get started." She said, "I'm ready." So shortly after that, Dennis pulled the body off of it there at his shop, and he was going to do all the fab work and all the metal work. And I did all the chassis, engine, electrical, all that sort of thing. But the funniest part about this car is you hear me talking about Mr. Larry. Mr. Larry was Dennis and Gwen's daddy. Miss Orme's husband, and they've been married as long as I can remember. And Mr. Larry, he's a funny type guy. He's so tight with his money, he squeaks when he walks. So I tell him we're gonna need. I said we're gonna build this engine. We need everything in it brand new. No, we don't. Yes, we do. I said we built this engine for Miss Orme. So one thing led to another, and finally I just said we need an open checkbook. We're gonna build this car. We need an open checkbook. Just cutting up. It never was serious because I'm not that. I'm not that type of person. I would never take advantage of nobody. I wouldn't spend somebody else's money foolishly. But it became a running joke as we built that car. If you need it, get it because we got an open checkbook. We got an open checkbook. So the best part about building that car, of course, working with them as family, the best part of building that car was being able to build a project, a high-end project, the best quality parts on somebody else's budget. Every nut and bolt come off. Everything was changed. Everything was brand new. It was just super fun. But the most fun part about it is it was on somebody else's budget. We showed this car all over the Southeast. We showed it at Circle Your Wagons. We showed it at Bugapalooza. It's been to Bug Jam. We've showed this car everywhere, and we've had a lot of success with it. I've had a lot of offers on this car, but probably the most proud moment of this car came last summer, or summer before last. Excuse me. My daughter was engaged to be married, and if you know my life story, know anything about me and my family, my daughter is spoiled so bad she's just terrible. She's a hardworking individual. I'm very proud of her. But I've spoiled her since day one, and her wedding showed it. So we were talking about the wedding, and we went and looked at the venue, and everything related to the venue was a white bardominium in black trim. Everything was white with black trim. So thought popped in my mind, they're going to do a what they call a fake send off, fireworks, whole 9 yards. I said, how cool would it be to do that in Graham's thing? So me and Emily and Drew, my son-in-law, my daughter, we talked about it, and she thought that was a great idea. So we ended up using Graham's thing as the drive-away car for my daughter's wedding. And Drew, he could have done it. I know he could have, but they wanted me to drive. They wanted me to be like the chauffeur. So we got video of us driving away from the venue, fireworks going off in the background. It's super cool. If you get a chance, check it out on YouTube. It's Drew and Emily Parker's wedding, but you can see that car and what I'm actually talking about. It's just a proud daddy moment.
I bet. Sounds awesome. Little goosebumps there thinking about how that looks. 2021, the Volkswagen. This is your first show back. You won best of show. Describe what that moment felt like when they called your name.
So this is a funny story all of its own. We've told this story many times, and we'll continue to tell this story. Volkswagen was the first all VW show that we had carried the car to. It was just Dennis, Miss Layton, and myself. Nobody else. This was new to us. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what to expect. I had seen this show before, but I'd never been. I'd been to Tannehill State Park many times, but never been to a Volkswagen show. All week long, we prepped the car, got it just spotless. I mean, everything underneath that car is spotless. Inside the wheel wells, the front beam, everything's spotless. Everything's new. All the fender hardware, all the fender webbing, everything's new. So as the day goes on, Miss Layton, she'd come to me and she'd say, do you see that orange thing? You see that thing over there? Do you see this one? Do you see that one? She was checking out every car that come in. And in her mind, she was making mental notes. So as the day went on, there was probably 125, 150 cars there. It's a good show.
Yeah.
Huge shout out to my buddy Adam Simpson. He puts that on. So that afternoon, awards time, we're sitting on the front row. Again, we had no idea what to expect. We don't even know what they're giving for trophies. We don't know. It's just a hot day in Alabama, and we were ready to go home. So the promoter, he starts going through the trophies, and they're doing, I want to say it was top 25. And they went through the top 25 pretty quick. Not one mention of Graham's thing. And we saw some other things that were there, and we saw what awards they got. And, we wasn't saying nothing. We were just kind of looking at each other and like confused. Because the top 25 come and gone and no mention of Graham's thing. Okay. So then they went to best paint. No mention of Graham's thing. Then they went to best engine. No mention of Graham's thing. Then they went to best interior. No mention of Graham's thing. So there's one trophy left, and it's best of show. Well, we're not even thinking about best of show. By this time, Dennis and Miss Orme, they're both fighting mad. They're both blood red. I mean, they're just boiling. They are boiling. So I'm going into defense mode because I'm riding. First of all, I'm riding with them, and I'm in defense mode. How am I going to get them out of jail? Because this is fixing to go ugly. It's fixing to go south, and it's fixing to go south fast. How am I going to get them out of jail? Because she's very proud of that car, and he is too, which we all are. That's his mom. That's his blood, you know. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And by that time in the background, they start calling out best of show. And they called out Aura May Late, Graham's Thing, Riverbank Customs. All three of us about fainted. Them two, I was standing up. They were sitting there in their chairs. I was standing up. And both of them just like fell back in their chairs and like took a breath. I watched her go get her trophy. I kid you not. And whoever's listening to this, you got my permission to laugh all you want to because you just had to been there. I watched two grown men and a grown woman cry over a car, over a Volkswagen that we built in our own shop.
What a feeling.
I was so mesmerized. Most time at a show, and this does happen, you'll know this, a lot of car shows, people get upset. They don't feel like their car was judged right. They don't feel like they were treated fair or whatever. So they request to see the judges' sheet. I go up to the judges, go up to Adam Simpson, the promoter, and I said, do you mind if I see the judges' sheet? The points, the scorecard for this car? And he's like, who are you? And I said, well, I built the car. He said, what's wrong? He said, you won. What's wrong? I said, no, I'm not upset by no means. I said, I'm just kind of mesmerized. I said, I'm in shock. I said, this is something we want to do on a regular basis. And I said, we want to be on that competitive level. So we just want to know, what do judges look for? What do judges think? And where do we need to make improvements? So we kind of had a conversation with the judges and we all laughed and cut up. So that was 2021. 2022, we go back to the same show and won best of show again.
Same car?
Same car.
Oh my goodness.
And this is one of the oldest running Volkswagen shows in this area, probably in the state of Alabama. And we won it 2 years in a row. We were just amazed. But that's kind of the story. That's how special this car is. We took this car to Bug Jam 2 years ago, probably the year that I met you. And she won best in class at Bug Jam. And you know yourself, if you win a trophy in Dade City, you've done something.
What's it like working with Stephen Presley and Dennis Layton?
Well, I'm as hard-headed of a person as you'll probably ever be. I'm going to do it my way. You can tell me your way, and I'll listen. But I almost promise you I'm going to do it my way. I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I've tore up a lot of stuff in my life. A lot of stuff that my daddy had come along and fixed. I probably work better by myself, but working with these guys is a pleasure, is an honor, it's a privilege. Dennis is that guy who wants to just get something done. He wants to. He's dedicated. He's focused. He's driven. He wants to. This is what we're going to do today. This is what we're going to get done. Well, I'm not that guy. I'll work on it at my pace and get to where I want to be. Stephen, he's the guy who is detail oriented, and he's the guy who can tell you it needs to be this color, this interior, this trim package. So all of our skills kind of all come together. I'm kind of the mechanics I'm the mechanics in the group, and they kind of bring their own to the group. So it's a privilege.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate build is a build that's looked at from several perspectives, not just one. So that's got to be pretty awesome. Tell me, what role does Lee Bailey play now in this new chapter?
So Lee and I worked together after the bug shop days. Lee and I worked at the same place. Lee actually worked for my daddy at the airport. We always stayed in touch, and we always swapped stories and kind of did the motorcycle thing together. So a couple years back, when I started kind of getting back into the Volkswagen scene, I would call him up. And I'd say, hey, guess what I'm working on? Well, hey, what about this? And I knew he had his own thing going, and he was doing his own, we all live on the river here, and we all play with boats and stuff. And I knew he had his own project, so I didn't want to bother him or nothing. But after I got to showing the Graham's thing a couple of times, I called him and I said, Lee, I said, Big D, I got to tell you something. I said, we played with these cars in the woods, and I said, there was a lot of money spent. I said, but times have changed. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, these cars are bringing ridiculous money. And he said, tell me. So I began to tell him about some of the cars I'd seen and the value they were bringing. And I said, dude, I want to open a shop. And I said, I think there's money to be made. I said, but I just think the opportunity to do what we really love is there.
That's
And I
it.
said, it's not that there's money to be made. I'm not trying to get rich by no means. I said, but there's enough work out there, and people are spending money. They want quality work, and they don't mind paying for it.
That's it.
So that's how in today's world, that's how you run a business. Say what you do what you say. So my theory was, if we can build a quality product, if we can build the best car at an affordable rate, we'll have more, and treat people right, we'll have more work than we can ever do.
Amen.
And so that's what it's done. So as time rocked on, I'd keep telling him, and I'd tell him, and I'd call him, and I'd tell him, and I'd call him, and I'd tell him something else. And finally, he called me one day, and he said, I found this car in I think I'm going to buy it. And I said, I told you you'd want one. So as he got back into it, and he's building his own car, we kind of use the shop to finance our hobby. He'd come help me on a project or whatever, a service job or whatever. And, we'd do some trading or whatever. I'd pay him whatever. So he's kind of the technical guy. He's that go-to guy. When I need help, I give him a call. When I need help, he comes to help me. When I have a question, he's usually got the answer. Well, me and him together can compile our knowledge and our experience, and we figure it out together. So he's a huge part of Riverbank Customs.
That's awesome, man. And you guys do wear a lot of hats there. I know there's, you got your merch, you got the mechanics, you got the paint, you got the YouTube. How do you guys kind of keep all that together and harmonize it?
So it's not easy. There's only so many hours in a day. And honestly, during COVID, I found this YouTube channel called VW Life. And I'm sure you've seen it because, it's one of the larger VW communities there is. And I got to watching that every day, and I binge watched every one of their shows. And that just made me want to start my own YouTube channel. So there again, I thought, if I can start a YouTube channel and ever get monetized, I can take what money I make off of YouTube, put back in the shop. YouTube can promote the shop and help finance my hobby. Well, when Steven come on board, Steven has always been the hat and t-shirt guy. He does hats, t-shirts for everybody in this area. So he brought that to the table. He's the paint and body guy. He's always done paint and body. So he has his part. I have my part. Dennis has his part, and we just make it work. We make a plan out every year of what shows we want to go to, and we kind of know what it's going to cost, what shows we want to sponsor, what shows we really want to be involved in, and we all work together. We all make decisions based on what we know.
How close are you in your? I know you're also full. You got a full-time job still, right?
Yes, I've been at Honda manufacturing for 21 years. Steven and I have been there 21 years, and I think Dennis is probably in his 24th year. So,
are you guys close to making this a full-time gig with Volkswagens, or is it still remain something that you just do on the side, kind of?
So right now it's something we're doing on the side, but it's actually a full-time job, because if I'm not in the shop working, I'm working on the YouTube channel. If I'm not on the YouTube channel, I'm on the phone ordering parts or making plans or whatever. It's kind of gotten into a full-time business. We can all retire in the next 5 years. So I keep telling them, and Dennis and I had this conversation this weekend. We got to get the shop up and running. We got to get to where we've got the experience, the know-how to bring a car in and get it out in a suitable amount of time where the customer's happy and we can pay the bills. We got to get the shop up and running to where 5 years from now, we walk out of Honda, it's like we don't even miss a day's worth of work. We go full time.
Well, that's possible, especially with the culture where it's at. You even said it yourself. They'll pay for good work. And,
Yes.
and we will. I say we because I'm a part of that community. I got a bad back. I'm not the best at the mechanical side, just not my cup of tea, something I never really learned growing up. That just wasn't me. I've been into Volkswagens. I had one in high school, but I had to pay other people to work on it, and I'm okay with that. I feel like the community is large enough now to be able to support that. Y'all keep doing your thing. You're obviously making waves. Something that you didn't mention that you're making time for is even stuff like this. You're coming out, you're doing podcasts and putting Riverbank on the map. So I know everybody probably appreciates your hustle.
It's funny you talk about building the community, and we all talk about that from a builder standpoint or just from an enthusiast, a hobbyist. But one thing that Stephen and Dennis and I, one thing we talked about in the months back and in the beginning stages, if we can build a community, because we've got a pretty hardcore group that runs with us. Huge shout out to my friends, 71 Vert, 65 Euro, 67 Blue. Just there's a lot of cars. Michael and Helen Blunt with Doodles that run with us. They've been to Bug Jam. If we can build a community, the work will come. But you got to build a community first.
That's solid gold right there. So you mentioned God a lot throughout the podcast. How has your faith played into this journey that you're on?
2 years ago, my mother passed away from terminal breast cancer. And as a man of faith, I've always been a praying type person. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in God. I believe God has a plan for all of us. God opens doors that God closes doors that no man can close, and he opens doors that no man can open. So through all of this with my mother, prayer was a constant thing. Even with her, all my life, prayer was a constant thing. In one of my early drives to work one morning, I was having a conversation with God and praying for this and praying for that and praying for this person and that person. Something come over me, honestly. And the Bible tells you, if you want something, ask for it. If you want God's blessing, ask for it. So I never forget talking to God, and I said, God, if Riverbank Customs is my future, if that's what you want me to do, show me the way. God, I'm willing to step out on faith. Show me the way. And dude, I promise you, that day, the phone began to ring. One customer after another. And we're not talking about oil change and valve adjustments. We're talking about full restoration. Guy called me with a 58, wanting to do a 58 Beetle, wanting to do a full restoration. Good friend of mine lives down the road, 74-mile bus, full restoration. Just one after another. We got a 67 convertible sitting here, full restoration. We just finished a full restoration on a 79 convertible. These are big jobs that carry you into the next level. But not only that, we've had multiple jobs that were engine build. We've had multiple jobs that were just bringing the car in and redoing the suspension. The big jobs come, but the little jobs also are coming. I've actually started, for lack of a better way of saying it, I've actually kind of started turning a little bit of work away because I've got more I can do. And it's all through the grace of God.
What an amazing feeling for your quality and the way that, you want things to be, for that to be recognized and for it to happen for you. I mean, I couldn't be happier for somebody to step out in faith and to do what makes them happy instead of what they have to do. Right.
Yes.
As men,
Yes.
we grow up, we do what we have to do, man. We support our families, we do what we have to do. And that's where that bumper sticker comes from. Right. But
Yes.
when you
Yes.
do what you want to do, there's something special in that. There's a recipe for a different level of success in your life. So I'm happy to hear that that's there for you. Tell me what your kids think about dad stepping off of the corporate wheel and getting into wrenching on VWs full time potentially here in the future.
Well, and that's a funny question there. Emily, my daughter, she's just finished her 4 years at Jacksonville State in the nursing field. So she's just in the beginning of her career. She's very career focused and just got married. And my son Blake, he just lives right up the street, but he's very career driven. He's very focused on his career in the electrical field. And both of them kind of do their thing, but they're right there when I need them. When I'm in the shop and I need some help, I can call Blake, and if he's in town, he's right there to help me. And he's in a lot of my videos. And honestly, he thinks it's just working on Volkswagens, but it's not. It's more about making memories. Now he's not a gearhead. I don't know. I don't know what happened. That kind of skipped him. He's not like me or his papa, but he likes cars, but he's not really into the Volkswagen thing. But he likes to see me happy.
I
Now
got
Emily,
I
go
got
ahead.
boys. I was just gonna say, man, I got boys, and I anticipated, you know, almost even tried to predict the way that they would grow up and the things that they would be interested in. And my brother, I couldn't be further away from from hitting that mark. They went, opposite directions and everything of what I expected. So, I got 5 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, buddy. So by kid number 2 even, I was like, "You know what? They gonna do what they gonna do. I'm just gonna be a good example." Because, I couldn't they didn't like, my first was my daughter, she's the oldest. So, I didn't know what it was like to have a girl.
No.
Right? So I had to learn that. Well, she liked animals and stuff and reptiles, and she wanted to be a veterinarian, all that type of stuff growing up. So there was no classic cars, V-dubs, any of that type of stuff with her. My first boy was into video games and computer technology, and then I finally got a tinker, and I could tell early on he was collecting the little tiny things and watching the way things worked and trying to see how they'd roll, and then he got into dirt bikes real young and learned how to clutch, and he still to this day is the one that I usually say, "Hey, I need some help outside with this, and I'm gonna try these wheels and I'm gonna do that." And he'll go, "All right, dad." But he does it. He comes and he helps me. So I got 1 out of 5 that's a wrencher.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now I will say this about Emily. Emily, she's a girly girl. She never was a tomboy by no means. So she wasn't coming to the shop. She'll stand if she needs me, she'll stand on the back porch until I come up there. She'll call me and say, "Dad, I'm leaving." But when I started the YouTube channel, I was as lost as I could be. Some of my first videos, and I'll admit they're painful to watch. She made the comment one day to her mama. She said, "Mama, Daddy's doing really good with his YouTube. I want to help him." Okay. So she come on board with me. And she taught me a couple of things about doing YouTube. I had no idea what a thumbnail was. I had no idea what Canva was or how to use it or anything. Didn't even know I had an account. She'd been using it. I'd just been paying for it. So she helped me with 3 or 4 videos, and it brought she and I really close. I mean, she brought things to the table that I had no idea about.
awesome.
So once we really got going, and I thought, hey, this is cool. This is bringing me and my daughter closer together. That's about the time she went off to nursing school. And when she went to nursing school, she didn't have time for Daddy no more. So
Right.
now I'm back on my own in the YouTube channel.
Well, good thing she hopefully taught you that stuff.
She did. She did.
Good stuff. So talk to me about the VW culture as we know it, because we're on this podcast, right? You and I are well equipped into the VW culture, but I feel like it's different than any other car scene. Tell me what you think makes this culture different than other car cultures.
Well, I'll tell you the same thing anybody else tell you. And I heard multiple people on your podcast say it. I've heard them on many other podcasts, many YouTube. It's the car special. There's no doubt about that. The car special. Everybody has a Volkswagen store. Everybody. But what makes the Volkswagen community so special is the people. You won't meet a stranger. You don't meet the know-it-all. You don't meet the smart aleck. Everybody, it's like you've known each other forever. It's all about the people. I tell you, and I've told this story. I know my buddy Robbie Johnson. I know he's sick of hearing it, but I'm going to tell it one more time because I want everybody to know this is the perfect example of the Volkswagen community. We were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, first 2 years, maybe 1 or 2 years after COVID. We were at Bugapalooza. And it was pouring down rain. It was sleeting. It was snowing. It was cold. We went on a cruise in that night in Graham's thing to Long's Restoration, to open house at Brad Long's shop, and had a great time. The car ran fine. but it was cold. It was bitter cold. So we hung out there all afternoon, and when we was coming back that night, we're lost. We're out of towners. We're lost, but we're following GPS, and we're headed back to Camp Jordan where the show was. We topped this hill on the interstate, and there was a broke down Volkswagen sitting there on the side of the road. So Dennis was driving, and he looked at me and he said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "There's no doubt. There's no question what we're going to do. We're going to pull over." So we pull over, and I immediately saw they had jumper cables hooked from one vehicle to another. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Oh, my battery's dead. And I'm running my lights, and my lights went dim, and the engine just shut off." And I said, "You're not charging. Something's going on with your alternator. You're not charging." Okay. And the owner, he's looking at me like, "Are you sure? Do you know what you're talking about?" And I said, "Buddy," I said, "I'm just here to help you." I said, "I've been doing this a long time." I said, "If you listen to me, I'll help you." "Well, you tell me what I need to do." I said, "How long you been hooked up to his battery?" He's "About 10 minutes. I said, "Crank it up." He did. And I said, "Where are you headed?" He said, "I'm going back to Camp Jordan." I said, "Good." I said, "You take off. You're going the same place we're going." I said, "Don't run your lights. Don't run your radio. Don't even run your phone charger." I said, "You go." And I said, "We'll be right behind you running our lights. We don't know where we're going, so we're following you, and we'll be the headlights." Okay, that makes sense. As I turned to go back and get in the thing with Dennis and Miss Orme, there stood Robbie Johnson. Robbie had stopped to help, but not only Robbie, there was 50 Volkswagens pulled over on the side of the interstate, all stopped to help one another. The people, that's what makes the Volkswagen community special. That's why we do what we do.
So, man, talk to me about what's coming up next for Riverbank Customs. Like, what's the big dream? What's the 5-year dream? I know you're anticipating retirement at some point, but let's lay it out there. Let's speak it into existence. What's the dream for Riverbank?
First and foremost, and to anybody watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you. And I'm asking for your help. My number one goal right now this year is to get the Riverbank Customs YouTube channel monetized. The 5-year dream is to have the YouTube channel monetized and generate a little bit of income, but to be able to create videos that people want to see, to be the people, to be approachable, to be the people at the show, have the booth to set up the cars at a show that people want to come and not just look at our cars, but they want to come and hang out. They want to come and sit around and laugh and joke and cut up and just be part of the community. I don't ever want to be that unapproachable guy. If you got a question about something, there is no dumb question. I want to be that guy that can help you. My number one passion in life is being able to help people. People are all the time asking questions, and I do the very best I can to answer them. Am I always right? No, I do the best I can to answer, but I create that friendship. I want to be that guy who's always there to help somebody else.
Relationships over transactions.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting from you. And what a hell of a way to represent yourself and your team and do business. That's really what it's all about. You know, the people are different. They are special. They do make up this culture. And you're fortunate enough to be able to do business with those people, the same ones that we celebrate and we talk about, and the same ones that I'm making a podcast off of, because similar to you, I have recognized that everybody has a story. In, you know, this quick story I can just say is because it happens all the time, is just last Friday, the local news network here, Bay News 9, they did a story on the car show that me and my buddy Alan hosted this weekend, V-Dubs on the Pier, downtown St. Pete. And as they're bringing up this story to talk about, hey, a couple local Volkswagen guys, they start talking about the Volkswagen Beetle. And the guy's like, "Oh, man, this is our news anchor." He's telling a story with this giant smile on his face about his memories of being a kid and then one time piling up 6 of his cousins and going somewhere. And then the other lady that's to his right also has a story, and she remembers her ladybug floor mats. And it's like, man, everybody has that dream. They have that Volkswagen story. So again, it's these people. I'll go back to that. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. It's just I celebrate those people too. I get to meet guys like you, true craftsmen, true awesome people that put relationships over transactions every day. And listen, buddy, in corporate America, I come from that background too. It's transactions over people. You're a number. You're very lucky if you get your name called in most cases. You're number 10 or you're number 300 or right? Like you're a number.
You're
You're not a name. So awesome to hear you say that. Heck of a way to do business. All right. I got some rapid fire style questions that I want to throw your way. Fast, quick answers. All right. Standard Baja or Beetle or Bug?
That's kind of a loaded question. When I was younger, it was the off-road Baja.
Okay.
As I'm getting older, it's all about the street car.
Yes, sir. So Bug now, Baja then.
Yep.
One tool that you can't live without.
I've got a dial torque wrench that belonged to my daddy. It'll always be in my toolbox. I use it on every engine build.
Man, that's awesome. That's special. Favorite VW show in the Southeast?
Okay, this is another loaded question, and please excuse me, I can't answer this real fast. Bug Jam is a great show, and it's one of my ultimate favorites. I have two favorites. Bug Jam for the size, the structure. Randy is a great promoter. He really makes us feel welcome when we're in town. We'll always, as long as we're in business and we're able, we'll always attend Bug Jam. Proud to be a gold sponsor there. When I see my name on that banner up there beside that stage, that's a proud moment. One of my also favorite shows is Robbie Johnson's show, the VW Getaway. And I tell you about that, it's a small scale show. It's growing every year. But from the time we get in town on Thursday afternoon to the time we leave on Sunday afternoon, there's something going on. There's one event right after another. There's people just going round and around. It's just a great event. And Robbie, I become friends with him a few years back, and he makes me and him talk on a regular basis. And he kind of makes me feel like I'm a part of that show. He respects my opinions and my thoughts, and he just makes me and my crew feel like we're a part of that show. So those are two of my favorite shows.
Two awesome shows. Who's one builder out there in the scene? Can be anywhere in the world. One builder that works on these cars that still inspires you to this day.
So I'm throw you for a little curve here. I'm gonna get away from the Volkswagen scene for a minute. When you talk about builders, you talk about car builders in general. One builder who has inspired me more than anybody in my career is Mr. Honda. Of course, he's done gone on. I never actually got the chance to meet the man, but I've worked for his corporation for 21 years. Mr. Honda was dedicated to the detail. He was dedicated to his team, and just the values, the core values that Honda manufacturing is built on has kind of directed my career to where I'm at today.
Favorite engine to build and why?
Favorite engine to build. I've built a lot of them over the years. I've been a part of a lot of engine builds. I built engines with Daddy. I've watched Lee build many of engines, helped him with many. I've had some really big stroker engines that built incredible power. But my favorite engine to build is the stock 1600. I like to build that stock 1600 with as original equipment as I can get, because I like to see what kind of longevity, what kind of reliability, what kind of drivability can I get out of the original car. We're not trying to drag race these things, or we're not trying to climb hills with them no more. We're trying to drive them A to B. And A to B might be from here in Pell City, Alabama, to Bug Jam in Dade City. That's right. The kind of engine I like to build.
Yeah. Okay. Good. My favorite as well. They start getting too souped up and needing all these, extra bits and pieces. To me, that's just more stuff that could fail.
Yeah.
So now I'm not saying I don't, everybody likes the hot rod. I wouldn't mind to have a lot of power and be able to do something with that, have some fun with it. But, the more, like I said, the more bells and whistles, the more problems. So I'm a 1600 fan myself. Dream VW project that you haven't built yet.
The dream VW project that I haven't built yet, it's a car that I've already purchased. It is a 69 Standard Beetle convertible. We're gathering parts at swap meets for it now, but it's a dream car because it's a car I'm building in my shop for my wife. I'm trying to get her involved in all this with me, and building her a convertible, I think that's going to bring her on the scene more and more.
Ooh, I like it. What's the worst thing you ever did to a VW? All this time, all this wrenching. What's the worst thing you ever did?
Worst thing I ever did, and I knew better. I knew the car. It's not the Baja I talked about in the first part of the podcast. But I bought a full body solid, rock solid 67 standard beater from a good friend of mine. And I cut the fenders and the aprons off of it and made a Baja out of it. Worst thing I ever done.
Who's crazier behind the wheel, you or your brother Keith?
He's never been really into the off-road scene. He's kind of the computer guru of the family.
Okay.
So I've seen him do some crazy stuff behind the wheel, but I'd have to say I got him beat.
Okay. What's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self today?
Looking back, if I could tell my younger self anything, it's basically don't never give up on your dreams. Always be that one who chases your dreams. And Tim McGraw wrote 2 songs about it. Live your life like you're dying. And don't never be a victim to a clock or a paycheck. Live your life to your fullest dreams. If that's what you want to do, go for it.
Yeah, man. It's such a privilege and a blessing to be able to work and like I said just a second ago, to be able to do the things that you want to do instead of the things that you have to do. And that's really what I hear coming all from that. So, man, tell me where people can find you. You know, if you want to give any shout outs to any of your YouTube channel, your Instagram, how can people find you? Just blare it out from the rooftops, man. Where can they go to give Riverbank a holler?
So if you're looking to get in touch with Riverbank Customs, you can find us on social media on Facebook at Riverbank Customs. You can find us on Instagram at riverbankcustoms.com. You can find us on YouTube at riverbankcustoms.com. Please, if you're interested in the Volkswagen community, you're interested in anything we got going on, please check us out. Drop us a line. Tell us where you're from, what you got going on. Ask us any questions you need to. We'll get back to you with an answer. But please, I'm asking, please like, share, and subscribe.
Awesome. And you guys have a heck of a YouTube that you're starting, and it's growing. And I've seen some of the work, man. I'm excited to have you here on the podcast, but even more excited now to know you. I'll see you at Bug Jam this year. I'll be out there. Randy is putting me in charge of and this is something that nobody knows yet. So there's going to be a stereo competition this year, and it's going to be sponsored by the podcast. So we're excited to be a part of that. We're excited to team up with Randy. Like you said, he's a hell of a promoter. We agree with that, and we're excited to certainly be given that opportunity. Randy's an awesome guy. Bug Jam is awesome, but even more awesome, I get to meet and hang out with guys like you. So excited for that. And that's a wrap for this episode of DubLife Diaries. Thanks for riding along with us and diving into these incredible stories of the people in the dubs that drive their dreams. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe or hit that follow button so you never miss an adventure. Do you have a story to tell or know somebody else who's living the dub life? Awesome! Reach out to us. You can find us on all socials at DubLife Diaries, or shoot me an email. I'm not hard to find. DubLifeDiaries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep the engines humming and the wheels turning, and always follow the road that inspires you. This is Joe Person. I'm signing off. I'll catch you on the next ride.